The arrogant Hirogen marauders laughed as Earth's defense fleet, badly outnumbered and outgunned, scattered before their onslaught. But that laughter died in their throats as 800,000 monstrous human dreadnoughts, each one the size of a small moon, materialized out of nowhere and unleashed devastation on the alien invaders. For grizzled human Admiral Eugene Ward, the sudden appearance of this ancient secret dreadnought fleet was humanity's last hope. The relentless Hirogen assault had already claimed dozens of human worlds, slaughtering millions. Led by the ruthless Tharos, the alien armada seemed unstoppable as it steamrolled towards Earth, the heart of human civilization. Ward gritted his teeth as reports flooded in of human colonies falling one by one before the alien onslaught. Outmatched in every way by superior Hirogen numbers and tech, humanity's regular defense forces were being systematically annihilated. Tharos gloated that humans were weak, primitive prey, fit only to be conquered and enslaved. But the Hirogen warlord's advisor had warned that human capabilities remained an unknown variable. Ward knew their only hope lay with the 800,000 dreadnoughts, hidden away millennia ago by human ancestors and cloaked in myth and legend. Racing against time, Ward and his officers sped to reach the secret station where the massive ships lay dormant. As the last human bastions crumbled, Ward arrived at the cloaked base. Frantic crews swarmed to bring the behemoths out of stasis and awaken their terrible weaponry. The dreadnoughts were operational, barely, but who would crew them? Hirogen warships burned inexorably closer, leaving trails of nuked human cities. Mankind teetered on the precipice of extinction. Ward had just hours to muster skeleton crews and lead his 800,000 ancient leviathans in a desperate charge against the onrushing aliens. One last stand to decide humanity's fate. Tharos's fingers dug into the armrests of his command chair as the enlarged hollow images of the human dreadnoughts loomed before him. Their impossibly huge angular silhouettes blotted out the stars, each ship a dark mountain of metal and menace. He blinked, not quite able to process the sight. His advisor's panicked voice rang in his ears, babbling about energy readings and mass estimates that couldn't possibly be correct. "Enough!" Tharos snapped, his eyes still glued to the apocalyptic vision of humanity's last stand made manifest. "Order the fleet to regroup at rally points Beta and Epsilon. Maintain screening formations. I want deep scans and tactical analysis of those ships immediately. Find me a weakness to exploit." As one, the Hirogen vessels pulled back from Earth's orbit, abandoning their position above humanity's bombardment-scarred homeworld. The monstrous human ships advanced implacably to fill the void like a closing fist. Tharos ground his fangs, furious at being put on the defensive. This was supposed to be his shining moment of triumph. No prey species fought back like this. The natural order was coming unraveled before his very eyes. On the bridge of his mighty flagship, Admiral Ward stood not slouching at all, barely daring to breathe as he took in the spectacle of 800,000 ancient behemoths poised to unleash hell. Weapon systems that had slept for untold millennia hummed to life, the very air crackling with building energies. The dreadnoughts' view screens showed nothing but the endless ranks of human ships, a sight at once awe-inspiring and terrifying. Ward activated the fleet-wide channel, his voice booming across the bridges and corridors of hundreds of thousands of reborn warships. "Soldiers of humanity, this is it. Everything we are, everything we've ever been, comes down to this moment. The Hirogen believe we are weak. They believe we are prey. Today we prove them wrong. Today we show them the terrible depths of human wrath. We will fight to the last ship, the last gun, the last man. For Earth." "For Earth!" The answering roar from millions of human throats shook the stars. Desperate pleas flooded the comms as the dreadnoughts surged forward, colonies begging for salvation, resistance cells praying for a miracle, the dispossessed dreaming of vengeance. On worlds seared and cracked by alien guns, in bunkers packed with starving refugees, all eyes turned to the heavens, to the impossible fleets blotting out the suns as god machines went to war. The Hirogen ships opened fire as the human leviathans entered extreme range. Searing lances of energy crackled across the void, splashing against the flanks of the dreadnoughts like hellish rain. Shields flared bright, dispersing the terrible energies in shimmering waves. Then the humans returned fire. Ancient weapons powered by incomprehensible physical forces lashed out, columns of white fire and unlight, ripping open the fabric of space itself to annihilate everything in their path. Hydrogen ships vanished by the dozen, by the hundred, torn to fragments before they could even scream. The void lit up like a newborn galaxy as the dreadnoughts closed with their tormentors, weapons blazing. Watching his fleet wither and burn under the dreadnoughts' assault, Tharos felt his gut turn to ice. What power was this? What monsters had humanity unleashed? As the human leviathans plowed through his warship's protective screens, their huge guns taking a horrific toll, one thought crystallized in his mind. He had to stop this fleet. He had to break those damnable ships no matter the consequences. If he failed here, the Hirogen's glorious conquest would be over before it had truly begun. This upstart species would not be his undoing. He would snatch victory from this, even if he had to rip it bleeding from humanity's talons. Admiral Ward's eyes widened as an unexpected alert flashed across his command console. A small convoy of human ships had just dropped out of FTL at the edge of the solar system. "Sir, we are receiving an urgent hail from the lead vessel," his communications officer reported. "Put it through," Ward ordered, his voice tense. The battered face of Captain Nolan Rye appeared on screen. "Admiral, we've got critical intel. We managed to salvage a disabled Hydrogen scout ship. You're not going to believe what we found in its computer core." Ward leaned forward. "Go on." "Tharos has a secret staging ground with a massive reserve fleet. If he calls them in, we're done for." Ward's mind raced. This could change everything. He turned to his tactical officer. "How many dreadnoughts can we spare without compromising our defense of Earth?" "Maybe a dozen of our most advanced units, sir." His second-in-command snapped to attention. "Sir?" "Take those ships and link up with Captain Rye's convoy. Use that Hydrogen scout to infiltrate their staging ground and hit them hard before Tharos can bring those reserves into play." As Voss's strike force disengaged from the main battle, Ward refocused on the chaos surrounding Earth. Titanic energies crackled between the warring fleets, space itself seeming to warp and twist under the strain. Meanwhile, at the secret Hydrogen staging ground, Voss's ships dropped out of FTL alongside Rye's battered convoy. The captured scout ship took point, broadcasting stolen IFF codes. "Enemy dreadnoughts detected," Rye's voice crackled over the comm. "They're not on alert. It's working." Voss allowed herself a predatory smile. "All ships prepare to fire on my mark. 3, 2, 1, now!" A storm of unimaginably powerful weaponry erupted from the human vessels, catching the Hydrogen completely off guard. Massive enemy ships were gutted in seconds, their crews vaporized before they could even sound an alarm. But the element of surprise couldn't last forever. Hydrogen battle stations began to return fire, their own fearsome weapons lashing out at the human attackers. On the bridge of her flagship, Voss gripped her command chair as the deck shuddered beneath her. "Status report!" "Shields at 60%. Minor hull breaches on decks 4 through 7, her tactical officer shouted. "But we've destroyed nearly a third of their reserve fleet." Suddenly, Rye's voice cut through the din of battle. "New contacts incoming. Tharos must have called for reinforcements." Voss's blood ran cold as she saw the overwhelming force bearing down on them. "All ships, prepare to withdraw. We've bloodied them. Now we need to get out alive." A retreat wouldn't be easy. The Hydrogen reinforcements were closing fast, threatening to cut off their escape route. "Captain Ray," Voss calmed, "that scout ship of yours, how stable is its reactor?" There was a moment of silence before Rye responded, his voice grim. "Stable enough to go boom if that's what you're asking, Commander." Voss nodded. "Then let's give these bastards one last surprise. Set it to overload and send it right at their biggest ship. We'll use the chaos to punch through their lines." The plan worked. As the scout ship detonated, the resulting explosion tore a ragged hole in the Hydrogen formation. Human ships raced through the gap, guns blazing to keep it open as they fled back towards Earth. In the main battle, Ward seized the opportunity created by Tharos's divided attention. His dreadnoughts pressed forward relentlessly, targeting Hirogen command and control centers. Slowly but surely, the tide began to turn. The once unstoppable Hirogen armada faltered under the humans' assault. Earth's orbit was gradually cleared of enemy ships, each hard-won kilometer of space a testament to humanity's resilience. As Voss's battered strike force rejoined the main fleet, Ward allowed himself a moment of cautious hope. They'd bloodied Tharos's nose and shown the galaxy that humanity wouldn't go quietly into the night. But Ward knew better than to celebrate just yet. This was just one battle in a much larger war. Tharos and his empire were still out there, still dangerous. The fight for humanity's future was a long way to go. The shockwaves from the battle near Earth still reverberated through the void as Admiral Eugene Ward paced the bridge of his flagship. Holographic displays flickered with damage reports and fleet readiness assessments. Despite their victory, Ward knew the war was nowhere near the end. "Tharos won't give up that easily," he muttered, studying the tactical projections. "We need to press our advantage before he can regroup." Ward called his top officers to the war room. As they filed in, the air crackled with tension and exhaustion. Commander Elara Voss, her uniform still bearing scorch marks from her recent mission, took a seat next to Captain Nolan Rye. His eyes were bloodshot from days without sleep. "Ladies and gentlemen," Ward began, "we've won a significant victory, but the Hirogen are far from defeated. Our intel suggests their production capacity remains largely intact. We need to change that." He tapped a control, and a holomap of Hirogen-controlled space sprang to life. Red icons pulsed, marking key strategic targets. "They're main shipyards and supply depots," Ward explained. "If we can cripple these, we'll hamstring their ability to sustain this war." The assembled officers leaned forward, studying the map intently. Ward outlined his daring plan, multiple strike forces hitting Hirogen assets across several sectors simultaneously. "Commander Voss," Ward said, turning to the battle-hardened officer, "I want you to lead the assault on their primary shipyard in the Centauri sector." Voss nodded grimly. "It'll be heavily defended, sir, but we'll get it done." "Captain Rye," Ward continued, "your recent infiltration experience will be crucial. I need you to lead a covert team to sabotage their main supply hub." Rye's eyes widened. "Using captured Hirogen ships, it's risky, but I volunteer, sir." As the officers dispersed to prepare their forces, Ward retreated to his private quarters. He activated a secure channel to Earth High Command, deliberately including false details about an imminent assault on a different Hirogen system. "Let's hope Tharos takes the bait," Ward murmured. Aboard his command ship, Tharos snarled at the latest intelligence reports. His recent defeat gnawed at him, driving him to increasingly erratic decisions. "The humans plan to strike Outpost Gamma 9, he growled. "Redirect half our remaining fleet to defend it. We will crush them there." His subordinates scrambled to comply, unaware they were falling into Ward's trap. Days later, Commander Voss stood on the bridge of her dreadnought as it dropped out of FTL near the Hirogen shipyards. The massive construction facilities stretched before them, jam-packed with half-built warships. "All ships, open fire!" Voss bellowed. A storm of destructive energy erupted from the human vessels, catching the shipyard's defenders completely off guard. Voss watched with grim satisfaction as production lines crumbled and incomplete Hirogen ships shattered under the onslaught. Simultaneously, light years away, Captain Rye's team maneuvered their captured Hirogen vessels through the supply hub's defensive grid. Rye's palms were slick with sweat as they transmitted the stolen IFF codes. "We're in," he whispered as they docked. "Move fast, plant the charges, and get out." His team raced through the hub's corridors, planting explosive devices at key junctures. Alarms began to blare just as they regained their ships. "Detonation in 3, 2, 1, Rye counted down. The hub erupted in a series of carefully orchestrated explosions, leaving its vital systems in ruins. Tharos received word of the devastating attacks with apoplectic rage. He immediately ordered his fleet to abandon their defensive posture around Outpost Gamma 9, but it was too late. The damage was done. As Voss and Rye's forces regrouped with the main human armada, Ward allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. But he knew the reprieve would be short-lived. Tharos was wounded, but not defeated. The war had entered a new, more desperate phase, and the fate of humanity still hung in the balance. Admiral Ward's eyes burned as he stared at the tactical display. The red icons representing Tharos's siege fleet swarmed around Ceres like angry hornets. He clenched his fists, rage boiling in his gut. "Dispatch Commander Voss immediately," he barked. "Full Dreadnought complement. We need to buy those civilians time." As Voss's fleet thundered towards Ceres, the colony's surface blazed with fire. Hydrogen warships rained death from orbit, reducing entire city blocks to ash and rubble. Panicked civilians crowded into makeshift shelters, the ground quaking beneath their feet as another bombardment struck home. Commander Voss stood rigid on her flagship's bridge as they dropped out of FTL. The scene before her was hellish. Ceres' night side glowed angry orange, great plumes of smoke visible even from orbit. "All ships engage the enemy," she ordered, her voice steady despite the horror unfolding before her. "Prioritize their heavy bombardment platforms. We need to take the pressure off the ground." Her dreadnoughts opened fire, lances of destructive energy slicing across space to slam into Hirogen vessels. The enemy, caught off guard by the sudden assault, scrambled to regroup. Meanwhile, Captain Rye and his infiltration team used the chaos of battle as cover. They maneuvered their captured Hirogen scout ship towards the massive enemy command vessel looming over Ceres' North Pole. "Feeding false IFF now," Rye muttered, fingers dancing across the alien controls. "Hold on, this'll be close." The command ship's hangar shields flickered, admitting Rye's vessel. As soon as they touched down, his team sprang into action. They raced through alien corridors, planting charges and hacking into critical systems. "Bridge secured," Rye's second-in-command reported. "We've got control of primary functions, but it won't last long." Rye nodded grimly. "Initiate reactor overload sequence. Let's turn this bastard into one big EMP." Back in the void, Voss pressed her advantage. With the enemy command structure in disarray thanks to Rye's sabotage, she targeted their capital ships mercilessly. "Ma'am, energy spike from the Hirogen flagship," her tactical officer shouted. Voss's eyes widened. "All ships brace for electromagnetic pulse." The Hirogen command ship detonated in a silent explosion of light and energy. The pulse washed over friend and foe alike, frying delicate systems and leaving ships adrift. In the aftermath, Voss's dreadnoughts, hardened against such attacks, made short work of the crippled Hirogen fleet. But the victory was bittersweet. As the last enemy ship fell silent, Voss surveyed the devastation wrought on Ceres. Entire swathes of the colony lay in ruins, millions dead or displaced, or... Days later, as the battered human forces regrouped, Admiral Ward received the news he'd been dreading. A priority transmission from Tharos himself, filled with barely contained rage. Ward's blood ran cold. He knew Tharos wasn't bluffing. Intelligence had confirmed the existence of Hirogen bioweapons research. With hands that trembled only slightly, he opened a secure channel to Dr. Aisha Syed, Earth's foremost xenobiologist. "Doctor," Ward said, his voice heavy, "I'm sending you something. It's bad. I need your team to analyze it immediately. Find me a way to stop it, or protect our people. We're running out of time." As Syed's team began their desperate work, Ward turned his attention to the fleet. He issued new orders, redeploying his forces to create a protective screen around key human worlds. Standing alone in his ready room, Ward stared out at the stars. The weight of billions of lives pressed down on him. He knew the choices ahead would be. Admiral Ward's fists clenched as he watched the incoming transmission from Arcadia Prime. The planet's surface, once a vibrant tapestry of sprawling cities and lush forests, now appeared as a sickly, mottled grey through the atmospheric haze. His stomach churned as he realized the full extent of Tharos's treachery. "Sir, "We're receiving an urgent distress call from Governor Tanner," his comms officer reported, voice tight with tension. The holographic display flickered to life, revealing the haggard face of Arcadia's leader. Dark circles rimmed her bloodshot eyes, and her skin had an unhealthy pallor. "Admiral," she croaked, "we need immediate evacuation. The virus, it's unlike anything we've ever seen. Our hospitals are overflowing. People are dying in the streets. Please, we can't—" A violent coughing fit interrupted her plea. Ward leaned forward, his voice steady despite the turmoil in his gut. "Governor, I'm dispatching Commander Voss with a Dreadnought task force immediately. We'll establish a quarantine perimeter and begin evacuations as soon as possible." He cut the transmission and turned to his second-in-command. "Get me Voss and Dr. Syed now." Within hours, Commander Voss's fleet dropped out of FTL on the outskirts of the Arcadian system. The scene that greeted them was one of unimaginable horror. Countless escape pods and civilian ships drifted lifelessly in high orbit, their occupants long dead from the virus that had ravaged their world. On the bridge of her flagship, Voss barked orders to her crew. "Establish a tight quarantine perimeter. No ships in or out without direct authorization. Prep med teams for emergency triage procedures." As her ships moved into position, Voss's gaze fell upon the planet below. The sprawling capital city of New Athens, once a jewel of human achievement, now lay shrouded in an eerie stillness. Plumes of black smoke rose from scattered points across the metropolis, grim beacons of a world in chaos. "Commander," her tactical officer called out, "we're picking up multiple launches from the surface, civilian craft, hundreds of them." Voss's eyes hardened. "They're desperate to escape. Warn them off. If they breach quarantine, we'll have no choice but to neutralize the threat." On the planet's surface, Captain Rye and his team moved through the desolate streets of New Athens. They wore hermetically sealed hazard suits, the only barrier between them and certain death. The once bustling thoroughfares were now littered with abandoned vehicles and the bodies of the fallen. Rye's voice crackled over the team's comm channel. "Stay alert. We need those viral samples for Dr. Syed. Move fast, but don't take any unnecessary risks." They approached the Central Medical Complex, a massive structure that now served as ground zero for the pandemic. The entrance was choked with bodies, the dead and dying intermingled in a grotesque tableau. Inside, the halls echoed with the moans of the infected. Medical staff, their protective gear long since compromised, stumbled about in a daze, now victims themselves of the relentless pathogen. Rye steeled himself as they located the main research lab. "All right, let's get what we came for and get the hell out of here." As his team collected the precious viral samples, Rye couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The hairs on the back of his neck stood on end as they made their way back to the extraction point. Aboard the orbiting research vessel, Dr. Aisha Syed hunched over her workstation, eyes burning from hours of unblinking focus. Holographic projections of the virus's molecular structure rotated before her, each new simulation revealing another facet of its terrifying complexity. "It's mutating faster than anything I've ever seen," she muttered to her assembled team. "But there's got to be a weakness, something we can exploit." As if in answer to her drive, a subroutine flagged a potential breakthrough. Syed's eyes widened as she examined the results. "This compound," she breathed, scarcely daring to hope. "It's not a cure, but it could be our best shot at halting the virus's spread." In the depths of space, humanity raced against time, desperate to save what remained of Arcadia Prime and stop Tharos before his bioweapon could claim another world. The stealth insertion craft sliced through the void, their black hulls absorbing sensor sweeps as they approached the remote planetoid. Inside, Commander Voss and Captain Rye studied the holographic display of their target, a sprawling underground complex housing Tharos's bioweapons stockpile. "Remember," Voss said, her voice low, "we hit hard and fast, draw their attention while Rye's team slips in the back." The craft touched down silently on the planetoid's cratered surface. Voss's team poured out, their boots crunching on rocky soil as they raced toward the facility's main entrance. Plasma bolts erupted from hidden defense turrets, forcing the soldiers to dive for cover. "Suppressing fire," Voss bellowed. Her troops unleashed a barrage, energy weapons lighting up the dim landscape. As chaos erupted at the front gates, Rai led his smaller unit around the perimeter. They located a secondary access point, a narrow maintenance shaft barely large enough for a person. One by one, they squeezed inside. The shaft opened into a dimly lit corridor. Rai signaled his team forward, their footsteps echoing on metal grating. They encountered their first Hirogen guard at an intersection. Before the alien could raise the alarm, Rai's combat knife found its mark. The body slumped silently to the floor. Meanwhile, Voss's team had breached the outer defenses. They pushed deeper into the complex, exchanging fire with Hirogen defenders, the air filled with acrid smoke and the scent of ozone. Rai's unit pressed on, dispatching Hirogen troops with ruthless efficiency. They reached a sealed blast door marked with alien hazard symbols. "This is it," Rai muttered. "Chen, get that door open." The engineer worked feverishly, bypassing security protocols. The massive door slid open with a hiss, revealing row upon row of containment units, each housed viral agents capable of devastating entire worlds. "Plant the charges," Rai ordered. "We need to vaporize every last sample." His team moved swiftly, rigging demolition devices throughout the chamber. As the last charge was set, a thunderous explosion rocked the facility. Emergency klaxons blared. "What the hell was that?" Chen shouted. Rai's eyes widened as he read the facility schematics on his datapad. The detonation triggered a systems overload. "This whole place is going critical." He keyed his comm. "Voss, we need to abort. The reactor's unstable." Static crackled, then, "Negative. We have to finish the job. Can you reach the reactor core?" Rai looked at his team, seeing the same unshakable focus in their eyes. "Affirmative. We'll overload it manually. Get your people out of here." They raced through twisting corridors, fighting their way past panicked Hirogen troops. They reached the reactor chamber as the facility shuddered around them. Warning lights bathed everything in an eerie red glow. "You three get to the extraction point," Rai ordered. "Chen and I will handle this." As his team retreated, Rai and Chen approached the pulsing reactor core. They worked in tandem, bypassing failsafes and redlining power outputs. "It's done," Chen said. "We've got 2 minutes before this thing goes supercritical." They sprinted for the exit, the complex disintegrating around them. They reached the surface just as Voss's shuttle touched down. The small craft lifted off, narrowly escaping the fireball that consumed the planetoid surface. From his flagship's bridge, Admiral Ward watched the planetoid erupt in a massive explosion. His dreadnoughts unleashed their full firepower on the remaining Hirogen warships, methodically obliterating the alien fleet. As the last enemy vessel winked out of existence, Ward allowed himself a moment of quiet reflection. The cost had been high, but they'd struck a crippling blow against Tharos. Hours later, Ward addressed his gathered admirals. The mood was somber yet resolute. "We've eliminated Tharos's bioweapons," Ward said, "but our fight is far from finished. It's time we took the offensive. We'll strike at the heart of Hirogen space itself. Prepare the fleet. We end this, once and for all." Admiral Ward stood before the assembled officers, his eyes blazing with intensity. "We've struck a blow against Tharos, but now is the time to press our advantage. Intelligence has pinpointed the location of his command nexus. We take it out. We cripple their ability to coordinate." Commander Voss leaned forward, studying the holographic display of Tharos's massive warship. "Sir, those defenses are unlike anything we've encountered. Multiple layers, minefields." "Which is why we're not going in guns blazing," Ward replied. He turned to Captain Rai. "Your insertion team will be our tip of the spear. Create an opening, and Voss's dreadnoughts will exploit it." Rai nodded, his face a mask of focus. "We won't let you down, sir." As the human fleet approached the outer defensive ring, Voss's voice crackled over the comms. "All ships prepare for engagement. Watch for proximity mines. The void erupted in chaos as hydrogen picket ships swarmed toward them. Energy beams lanced out, striking shields and armor. Voss's fingers danced across her tactical display, issuing rapid-fire orders. Dreadnought Thermopylae, adjust heading 035, interceptors clear those mines. A series of explosions blossomed in the darkness as human fighters detonated the deadly minefield. Voss seized the opportunity, guiding her ships through the gap. Aboard a stealth craft, Rye and his team approached the defensive command node. "Prepare for hard dock," he ordered. "Breach charges ready." The craft shuddered as it latched onto the hydrogen structure. Seconds later, an explosion tore through the airlock. Rye's team poured in, plasma rifles spitting death at the surprised hydrogen defenders. "Chen, get to that control terminal," Rye shouted over the din of battle. "Shut down those outer defenses." As Chen worked feverishly, Rye's team held off waves of hydrogen reinforcements. Suddenly, the node systems flickered and died. "It's done," Chen called out. "We've got maybe 5 minutes before they can reboot." Voss seized the moment. "All ships push through, concentrate fire on their inner screen." The human dreadnoughts surged forward, their massive guns hammering the hydrogen defenses. Ship-to-ship battles raged as fighters dueled in the space between capital ships. Rye's team, having accomplished their mission, fought their way back to their craft. As they disengaged from the node, Rye spotted Tharos's command nexus looming ahead. "This is Rye," he transmitted. "We're going for the primary target. Request fighter support to clear us a path." Human fighters screamed past, strafing the nexus's hull. Rye's craft slipped through the chaos, latching onto a breach in the massive ship's armor. Inside, they encountered fierce resistance. Hydrogen security forces poured fire down the corridors, forcing Rye's team to advance methodically, room by room. "Push forward," Rye shouted. "We need to reach those shield generators." As they fought deeper into the ship, explosions rocked the hull. Voss's dreadnoughts had begun their assault on the weakening defenses. Finally, they reached the generator room. Chen planted charges while the rest of the team held off waves of hydrogen troops. The subsequent explosion plunged the nexus into darkness. "Shields down," Rye reported. "Voss, you're clear to engage." On the bridge, Tharos received the news with mounting fury. "Impossible," he raged. "How could they penetrate our defenses?" Tharos's eyes narrowed. "Very well, if they want this ship so badly, we'll give it to them, as their tomb." He strode to a control panel, entering a series of commands. Warning klaxons blared throughout the ship. Rye and his team fought their way onto the bridge, only to find Tharos waiting, surrounded by his elite guard. A vicious firefight erupted, both sides taking cover behind consoles and bulkheads. "We need to abort that meltdown," Rye shouted over the din. "Chen, see if you can access the reactor controls." But as Chen made his way to a terminal, a stray shot caught him in the shoulder. He stumbled, crying out in pain. Rye assessed the situation in an instant. They were out of time. As they retreated, the ship began to tear itself apart. Explosions rocked the corridors and entire sections depressurized violently. "Voss," Rye called over the comms, "we need immediate extraction." Outside, Voss's dreadnoughts continued their relentless assault, but at Rye's transmission she quickly adjusted her strategy. "All fighters clear a path to the Nexus hull," she commanded. "Create an extraction point for Rye's team." Human fighters swooped in, their weapons carving a hole in the disintegrating ship. Rye's team fought their way through disoriented hydrogen troops, inching closer to freedom with each passing second. Finally, they reached the breach. One by one, they leapt into the void, mag boots engaging as they landed on the hull of a waiting rescue craft. As the last team member cleared the Nexus, a blinding light erupted from within. The massive ship disintegrated in a blinding flash, shockwaves rippling through space. Admiral Ward stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the spectacular demise of Tharos's command Nexus. The immediate threat had been neutralized, but Ward's eyes narrowed as he studied the tactical displays. "Status report," he barked. His executive officer approached, datapad in hand. "Sir, we've confirmed the destruction of Tharos's vessel. However, long-range scans show multiple Hyrogen fleets regrouping in nearby systems." Ward nodded grimly. As expected, they're like rats fleeing a sinking ship, each vying for control. He turned to face the holoprojector dominating the center of the bridge. It flickered to life, displaying a galaxy-wide strategic map. Red icons representing Hyrogen forces blinked across vast swathes of space. "Bring up the latest intelligence reports," Ward ordered. The map shifted, highlighting key Hyrogen strongholds and fleet movements. One name kept appearing in intercepted communications: Thrakoth. Ward's comm officer spoke up. "Sir, we've decrypted more of the Hyrogen transmissions. It seems this Thrakoth character is rallying a significant portion of their remaining forces." The Admiral leaned in, studying the data. His eyes widened as he pieced together the implications. They're not retreating. They're massing for a counterattack. He straightened, his voice carrying across the bridge. "All hands battle stations. We're not out of this fight yet." Hours later, Ward stood before a hastily assembled war council. The holoprojector displayed a 3D rendering of Earth and its defensive perimeter. Commander Voss and Captain Rye, their uniforms still bearing scorch marks from recent battles, listened intently. "Intelligence confirms our worst fears," Ward began. "Thrakoth plans to strike at Earth itself. He aims to break our will by threatening our homeworld." Voss leaned forward, her voice tight. "We should move the entire fleet to reinforce Sol's defenses. We can't risk Earth falling." Rye nodded in agreement, but Ward held up a hand. "And leave our colonies exposed, we'd be trading one vulnerability for another." The Admiral manipulated the holo-display, expanding it to show multiple sectors. "We need a multi-pronged approach. Voss, you'll lead our vanguard at Sol's outer perimeter. Hit-and-run tactics, bleed them dry before they reach Earth." Voss nodded, already formulating strategies. Ward turned to Rye. "Captain, I need your expertise for a series of covert strikes. Disrupt their supply lines, create chaos in their rear echelons." "Consider it done, sir," Rye replied, a glint of anticipation in his eyes. "Meanwhile," Ward continued, "I'll take our main battle groups on an aggressive push into Hyrogen territory. We'll strike their staging areas, deny them the resources to sustain this invasion." The Council spent the next hours hammering out the details of their daring plan. As they adjourned, Ward gazed out at the stars, the weight of humanity's fate heavy on his shoulders. Days later, alarms blared across Voss's flagship, as Hyrogen warships tore out of FTL at the edge of the Sol system. Her voice rang out, calm and steady amidst the chaos. "All ships battle formation Delta. Cruisers establish firing solutions on their vanguard. Destroyers prepare to launch fighter screens." Space lit up with weapons fire as the two fleets clashed. Voss's ships darted in and out of engagement range, striking hard before retreating, denying the Hyrogen a chance to bring their superior numbers to bear. Across the galaxy, Rye's stealth ships slipped through enemy lines. On a Hyrogen-controlled moon, his team moved silently through the shadows of a massive supply depot. Rye's voice was barely a whisper as he gave the order. They melted away into the darkness seconds before a series of explosions rocked the facility, destroying stockpiles of weapons and fuel meant for Thrakoth's invasion force. Meanwhile, Ward's Dreadnoughts unleashed hell upon a Hyrogen shipyard. Massive energy beams lanced out, cutting through orbital defenses and reducing partially constructed warships to molten slag. On his bridge, Ward watched the battle unfold with grim satisfaction. "Press the attack, we need to keep them off balance." But even as human forces scored victory after victory, the Hyrogen refused to relent. Thrakoth's armada pushed relentlessly towards Earth, absorbing punishing losses. Ward studied the tactical display, noting a shift in the enemy's formation. His eyes narrowed as he realized Thrakoth's gambit. "He's splitting his fleet," Ward muttered, "trying to outflank us." He keyed his comm, knowing the next few moments could decide the fate of Earth itself. "Task Force Epsilon, move to intercept their flanking force." All other ships maintain pressure on their main thrust. As fresh alarms sounded, signaling the approach of Thrakoth's flanking armada, Ward set his jaw. The true test of humanity's tenacity was about to begin. Admiral Ward's eyes darted across the holographic display, tracking the movements of Thrakoth's forces as they split their formation. He keyed his comm, his voice sharp and clear. "Commander Graves, this is Ward. Thrakoth's trying to flank us. Take your Dreadnought group and cut them off before they can link up with the main force." "Understood, Admiral," Graves responded, his tone steady. "We're moving to intercept." The massive human warships surged forward, engines flaring as they accelerated towards the Jovian moons. On the bridge of his flagship, Commander Graves studied the tactical readouts. "All ships, prepare for long-range engagement," he ordered. "Let's hit them hard before they know what's coming." As the Hirogen splinter fleet came into view, Graves's dreadnoughts opened fire. Lances of energy sliced through space, slamming into Hirogen warships with devastating effect. Hull plating buckled, and atmosphere vented from gaping wounds. A Hirogen commander's voice crackled over an open channel, panic evident in his tone. "Evasive maneuvers, return fire." But it was too late. The human assault had caught them completely off guard. Graves watched with grim satisfaction as Hirogen ships struggled to maintain formation under the punishing barrage. "Now's our chance," Graves muttered. He opened a channel to his fleet. "All ships push forward, boarding teams stand by." The human dreadnoughts surged ahead, closing the distance to the battered Hirogen fleet. As they drew near, Graves gave the order. Assault craft streamed from the dreadnoughts' hangars, weaving through the debris-strewn battlefield. They latched onto damaged Hirogen vessels, cutting torches blazing as they forced entry. Inside a Hirogen cruiser, human marines fought their way through smoke-filled corridors. Staff Sergeant Elena Chen led her squad towards the bridge, plasma rifle at the ready. "Contact!" she shouted, as Hirogen defenders opened fire from across corridor. Chen's squad took cover, returning fire with practiced precision. After a fierce firefight, they secured the bridge. Chen strode to the main console, fingers flying over alien controls. "Bridge secured. Rerouting weapons control to our systems." Across the battlefield, more and more Hirogen ships fell under human control. Graves watched with satisfaction as the enemy fleet's cohesion crumbled. But the tide of battle was about to shift again. Fresh Hirogen reinforcements tore out of FTL, moving to support their beleaguered comrades. Graves's voice was tense as he reported in. "Admiral Ward, we've got incoming, a lot of incoming." "Understood, Commander," Ward replied. "Hold your position. Reinforcements are on the way." As Graves's task force braced for impact, a new wave of human dreadnoughts arrived, their guns already blazing. The battle for Jupiter's moons raged on, neither side willing to yield. Meanwhile, near Earth's orbit, Commander Voss stood on her flagship's bridge, watching as Thrakoth's main force pressed their attack. Alarms blared as enemy fire slammed into their shields. "Evasive pattern Delta," Voss ordered calmly. "Rotate our damaged sections away from their firing arcs." Her fleet moved with practiced precision, absorbing the Hirogen barrage while maneuvering into position. Voss's eyes narrowed as she spotted a weakness in the enemy formation. "There's our opening," she muttered. "All ships concentrate fire on grid 735. Let's punch a hole in their line." Human dreadnoughts unleashed a devastating salvo, their combined firepower tearing through the Hirogen defenses. As the enemy line wavered, Voss pressed the attack, her ships driving deeper into their formation. The battle for Earth had entered a new phase, with both sides locked in a desperate struggle for supremacy. The fate of humanity hung in the balance, with victory or annihilation as the only possible outcomes. The dust settled over Earth's orbit, as the last remnants of Thrakoth's invasion force scattered to the solar winds. Admiral Ward stood on the bridge of his flagship, his eyes fixed on the holographic display showing the aftermath of their hard-fought victory. "Sir," his XO approached, datapad in hand. "Latest intelligence reports are in." Ward took the pad, scrolling through the information. His brow furrowed as he read. "Kartak," he muttered. "I should have known he'd survive." The Admiral called up additional data on the Hirogen commander. Images and intercepts flashed across the screen, showing Kartak rallying disaffected warriors to his banner. Ward's finger tapped a rapid rhythm on the console. He's cunning, this one. We can't allow him to consolidate power. He turned to his communications officer. Get me Commander Voss, now. Moments later, Voss's face appeared on the main view screen. Admiral, she nodded, her expression questioning. Commander, I have a new assignment for you, Ward began. One that requires your unique skill set. He laid out the plan, watching as Voss's eyes lit up with understanding. Infiltration and sabotage, she said, a hint of anticipation in her voice. Consider it done, sir. Days later, Voss stood in the hangar bay of her cloaked vessel, surrounded by her hand-picked team. They wore salvaged Hirogen armor, each piece carefully modified to conceal their true identities. Remember, Voss addressed her operatives, her voice low and intense, our job is to sow chaos and discord. We strike from the shadows, let them tear themselves apart. The team boarded their captured Hirogen shuttle, engines humming to life as they prepared to infiltrate enemy space. Voss took her seat at the helm, her fingers dancing across unfamiliar controls. As they approached the Hirogen outpost, Voss keyed in the stolen access codes. For a tense moment, nothing happened. Then the hangar doors began to open. We're in, she breathed, guiding the shuttle to a landing. The team moved swiftly through the outpost's corridors, their Hirogen disguises holding up under scrutiny. They reached the main computer core, and Voss nodded to her tech specialist. The operative plugged in a data spike, fingers flying over the alien interface. Virus uploaded, he whispered. Supply chain data is scrambled. Voss allowed herself a small smile. Now for Phase 2. They made their way to the communications hub, subduing the skeleton crew with ruthless efficiency. Voss took control of the main console, broadcasting their carefully crafted misinformation across Hirogen channels. As alarms began to blare, Voss and her team melted away into the chaos they'd created, leaving bewildered Hirogen forces in their wake. Across the sector, Ward led his Dreadnought group towards the hidden Hirogen shipyard. The massive human vessels dropped out of FTL, weapons already firing. All ships concentrate fire on their construction bays, Ward ordered, watching as lances of energy tore through partially built Hirogen vessels. As the human fleet pressed their advantage, Captain Rai's squadron prepared for their own mission. Rai stood on the bridge of his lead ship, studying the latest intelligence on Hirogen fleet movements. There, he pointed to a cluster of enemy signatures. That's our first target, helm set course, all ships prepare for hit-and-run engagement. Rai's vessels surged forward, striking the isolated Hirogen force with devastating precision. As the enemy struggled to mount a defense, Rai was already issuing new orders. Disengage and regroup, he called out. We hit the next target in 30 minutes. As Ward's multi-pronged offensive took its toll, Kartak paced the command deck of his flagship. Reports of sabotage, ambushes and desertion poured in from all corners of his fledgling empire. Traitors, he snarled, smashing a fist into a nearby console. Weaklings and cowards, all of them. Kartak whirled on him, eyes blazing. Consider what? Surrender? Never! We will make our stand here and now. Let the humans come. We'll show them the true might of the Hirogen. As Kartak barked orders to gather his remaining forces, a spark of doubt flickered in his eyes. He pushed it aside, focusing on the battle to come. But deep in his gut, a cold dread began to take root. Admiral Ward stood on the bridge of his flagship, his eyes scanning the tactical displays as he assessed the situation. The remnants of Kartak's forces had gathered for a final stand, and Ward knew this was the moment to end the war decisively. All ships, battle stations, Ward's voice rang out across the fleet-wide comm. This is it. We crush them here and now. The human armada surged forward, a wall of steel and firepower bearing down on the Hirogen fleet. As they closed to engagement range, space lit up with the fury of their weapons. Turbo-laser fire lanced out from human dreadnoughts, carving molten furrows in Hirogen hull plating. Antimatter missiles streaked across the void, detonating in blinding flashes that overloaded enemy shields. On his flagship's bridge, Kartak snarled orders to his crew. "Push through their lines, we'll break their formation or die trying." Hydrogen warships charged recklessly into the human fleet's teeth, trading concentrated fire for the chance to close to knife-fighting range. Ward watched calmly as enemy vessels were shredded by his Dreadnoughts' disciplined volleys. "Concentrate fire on Grid 7-3, Ward commanded. "Don't let them punch through." Rail cannon slugs accelerated to relativistic speeds, tore through hydrogen ships, the hypervelocity impact sending debris spinning away in expanding clouds. Ward's tactical officers worked feverishly, coordinating shield recharge cycles to keep the fleet's defenses strong. Kartak, seeing his initial assault falter, made a desperate gamble. "All capital ships set collision course with their center. We'll crack their line open if it's the last thing we do." The massive Hirogen vessels surged forward, engines redlining as they plowed through brutal human fire. Their shields failed and armor buckled, but still they came on. As the Hirogen ships closed to point-blank range, Ward gave the order. "Mark!" The combined firepower of the human Dreadnoughts' main batteries erupted simultaneously. A wall of superheated plasma engulfed the charging Hirogen ships. When it cleared, only drifting wreckage remained. Ward seized the initiative. "Commander Voss, take your group and hit their flagship. Cut it off from support." Voss's elite ships sliced through the crumbling Hirogen formation, their weapons blazing. They pounded Kartak's flagship mercilessly, methodically eliminating its offensive capabilities. "Direct hit on their main reactor," Voss reported. "Their shields are down." As his crippled vessel drifted, Kartak knew the battle was lost. With a snarl of rage, he transmitted the retreat order. Cheers erupted across the human fleet as the Hirogen broke and ran, but Kartak had one last card to play. "Sir, energy spike from the enemy flagship," a sensor officer called out. "They've launched some kind of warhead." Ward's tactical display showed the projectile streaking towards his ship. "Evasive action!" But the warhead was too fast. Its vector locked on their position. As alarms blared, Captain Rai rushed onto the bridge. Rai's fingers flew over the weapons console, overriding safeties and redirecting the main guns. "Firing now!" A stream of antimatter-laced projectiles erupted from the Dreadnought's guns, intersecting the warhead's path. For a moment, a miniature black hole flickered into existence, shredding the Hirogen weapon. As the last Hirogen ships fled, Ward surveyed the aftermath. The enemy was broken, but the cost had been staggering. He keyed his comm, his voice heavy. "All ships, stand down from battle stations. Begin search and rescue operations for damaged vessels." Ward turned to his XO. "Prepare a full damage assessment. We need to know our fleet's status before we begin mop-up operations." As the adrenaline of battle faded, the weight of their victory settled on Ward's shoulders. They had won, but the scars of this war would linger for years to come. Admiral Ward stood at the viewport of his flagship, watching as the last remnants of Kartak's forces scattered into the void. The bridge hummed with activity as damage reports and casualty lists scrolled across screens. Ward's eyes narrowed as he scanned the data. "XO, what's our fleet status?" Commander Chen approached, datapad in hand. "Sir, we've lost 12 frigates and 3 cruisers. 5 Dreadnoughts reporting severe damage. Casualty figures still coming in, but early estimates put it at over 2,000. "Shattered, sir. Intel suggests less than 20% of Kartak's forces escaped." "Not good enough," Ward muttered. He turned to his communications officer. "Get me a secure link to Fleet Command. We need to coordinate our next moves." As Ward conferred with his superiors, alerts flashed across tactical screens. Chen's voice cut through the chatter. "Admiral, priority message from Outpost Sigma 9. They've detected Hirogen activity in the Helios cluster." Ward's eyes snapped to the star chart. The Helios cluster, a remote asteroid field housing several human mining colonies. "On screen," he ordered. The holographic display flickered to life, showing grainy footage of Hirogen ships descending on a small outpost. Panicked transmissions crackled through the speakers. Under attack. This is Helios Prime calling any allied vessels. We're being overrun by Hirogen forces led by someone calling himself Grakath. They're rounding up civilians. Please send... The transmission cut off abruptly. Ward's fists clenched at his sides. Chen, get me everything we have on this Grakath, and alert Commander Voss. I want her task force prepped and ready to move in 30 minutes. As the bridge erupted into frenzied activity, Ward studied the tactical overlay. The Helios cluster was days away at maximum warp. He keyed his comm. Engineering, I need every ounce of power you can give me to the warp drives. We're pushing hard for Helios Prime. Hours later, Voss's task force dropped out of warp amid a sea of tumbling asteroids. Her flagship's sensors immediately lit up with hostile contacts. Multiple Hirogen vessels detected, her tactical officer reported. Primitive designs, retrofitted mining ships and cargo haulers. No match for our firepower. Voss nodded. All ships weapons free, take them out. Her dreadnoughts opened fire. Lances of energy slicing through the makeshift Hirogen fleet. Explosions blossomed in the void as ship after ship succumbed to the onslaught. On the colony's surface, Captain Rai and his strike team moved swiftly through cramped corridors. The sounds of distant fighting echoed through the station. Jenkins, status on those security doors, Rai hissed into his comm. Almost there, sir, came the reply. These Hirogen really did a number on the systems. Rai peered around a corner, catching sight of two hulking Hirogen guards. He signaled to his team, then stepped out, rifle raised. This is your only warning. Surrender now. The Hirogen roared, raising their weapons. Rai's team opened fire, cutting them down in a hail of plasma bolts. Move up, Rai ordered. We need to secure those civilian shelters. They fought their way deeper into the colony, freeing groups of terrified miners and technicians. Rai's comm crackled to life. Captain, we've located Grakath. He's holed up in the central processing complex. Roger that. All teams converge on my position. We're ending this. Rai led the charge into the complex, his commandos fanning out to secure the area. They found Grakath in the main control room, surrounded by a handful of die-hard loyalists. The Hirogen warlord sneered at the human forces. You think this victory means anything? There will always be more of us, human. Your kind are nothing but prey. Rai stepped forward. It's over, Grakath. Lay down your weapons. For a moment it seemed the Hirogen might comply. Then, with a primal roar, Grakath opened fire. Chaos erupted as both sides exchanged shots at point-blank range. Rai dove for cover, barking orders to his team. He popped up to return fire and felt a searing pain in his chest. Looking down, he saw blood spreading across his armor. The world tilted sideways as he collapsed. Through blurring vision, Rai saw his commandos swarming Grakath's position. The last thing he heard before darkness took him was the thunder of approaching dropships, Voss's reinforcements arriving to mop up the remaining resistance. Aboard her flagship, Commander Voss watched the unfolding battle with growing concern. Status on Captain Rai's team? She demanded. Multiple casualties reported, ma'am. Captain Rai is down, condition critical. Voss's teeth gritted. Get our medevac teams in there now. I want Rai and any wounded extracted immediately. She turned to her weapons officer. Target Grakath's position. I want suppressing fire on that complex. Give our people cover to get out. The Dreadnoughts opened up, their guns reducing the upper levels of the processing facility to rubble. Under the barrage, Rai's commandos managed to drag their fallen leader to safety. As the last pockets of resistance were crushed, Voss received word that Admiral Ward's main fleet had arrived in system. She watched as the massive ships took up defensive positions around the battered colony. Ward's face appeared on her view screen, his expression grim. Report, Commander. Colony secured, sir. Grakath's forces have been neutralized. We've suffered casualties. Captain Rai is critically wounded. Ward's eyes closed briefly. Understood. Prepare for my arrival. I'll oversee the evacuation personally. Hours later, Ward stood in the medical bay of his flagship, looking down at Rai's unconscious form. The captain lay pale and still, surrounded by beeping monitors and hovering medical drones. Ward nodded. "He'll get the best we have. Make the arrangements." As he turned to leave, a junior officer hurried up. "Sir, urgent communique from Fleet Command. We're getting reports of multiple colonies going dark along the frontier. They're requesting immediate assistance." Ward's eyes hardened. He cast one last look at Rye before striding toward the bridge. There would be time to tend to the wounded later. For now, the fight went on. "Alert all ships," he ordered. "We're moving out. Plot a course for the frontier and prepare for—" Admiral Ward stood motionless on the bridge of his flagship, eyes fixed on the tactical display. The distress call from the remote mining outpost echoed in his mind, a garbled plea cut short by static. He turned to his XO. "Assemble a rapid reaction flotilla. Captain Rye will lead." Hours later, Rye stood at attention in Ward's ready room, his stance betraying lingering stiffness from his recent injuries. "Are you fit for this mission, Captain?" Ward asked, studying the younger officer. Rye met his gaze. "Yes, sir, I won't let you down." Ward nodded. "Good, you leave in 30 minutes. Godspeed." The flotilla dropped out of FTL at the edge of the mining system. Rye leaned forward in his command chair, scanning sensor readouts. "Life signs?" Rye asked. Rye's eyebrows furrowed. "Launch search and rescue teams. I want every inch of that outpost combed." Shuttles streaked toward the surface as Rye's ships took up defensive positions. On the ground, armored troopers picked their way through the devastation. "Captain," a Marine's voice crackled over the comm, "you need to see this." The video feed showed a nightmarish scene. Bodies lay strewn about, limbs contorted at unnatural angles. But it was the deliberate mutilations that turned Rye's stomach. Precise incisions, missing organs, severed heads mounted like trophies. "Hirogen!" Rye spat. Before he could issue new orders, alarms blared across the bridge. "Multiple contacts," his tactical officer shouted. "Decloaking at the system's edge." Rye barely had time to bark. "Battle stations!" before space lit up with weapons fire. Hirogen destroyers materialized from nowhere, lashing out with disruptor beams and torpedo barrages before vanishing again. "Evasive maneuvers," Rye ordered, gripping his chair as the ship rocked. "Return fire!" His flotilla struggled to respond, shields flaring under the assault. Rye's fingers danced across his console, coordinating his ships into overlapping defensive formations. Fighter squadrons screamed from launch bays, hunting the flickering shadows of cloaked Hirogen craft. But for every attacker they drove off, 2 more seemed to appear. Rye watched helplessly as a frigate on his flank erupted in a ball of flame. "Sir, we can't hold them," his XO shouted over the din of battle. Rye's mind raced. They were outgunned and outnumbered. His priority now had to be getting word back to Ward. "All ships prepare for emergency jump," he ordered. "Tactical, get me a link to the outpost's defense grid." His crew worked frantically, overriding security protocols to seize control of the colony's automated defenses. As Rye's battered ships limped into formation, surface-to-space batteries roared to life, filling the sky with plasma bolts. Stars blurred as the flotilla leapt to FTL. Rye sagged in his chair, adrenaline fading. He keyed his comm. "Admiral Ward, this is Captain Rye. Mission failed. We were ambushed by Hirogen forces requesting immediate reinforcements." Light years away, Ward digested the grim news. His face hardened as he turned to his bridge crew. "All ships prepare for immediate departure. We're going hunting." Admiral Ward stood at the center of the bustling bridge, his eyes darting between holographic displays, showing the unfolding chaos across multiple star systems. The cacophony of urgent reports and blaring alarms filled the air as his crew worked feverishly to process the flood of incoming data. "Sir, long-range scans are picking up massive Hirogen fleet movements," announced the sensor officer, her voice taut with tension. "They're converging on key strategic points throughout the sector." Ward's lips pursed as he absorbed the implications. "Bring up a tactical overview of the entire region," he ordered. A sprawling three-dimensional star map materialized before him, dotted with ominous red icons representing hydrogen forces. The sheer scale of the enemy buildup was staggering. "This is no mere raid," Ward muttered. "It's a full-scale invasion." He keyed his comm, summoning his top officers to an emergency strategy session. Minutes later, Commander Voss and Captain Rye hurried onto the bridge. Rye still moved with a slight limp, his recent injuries not fully healed. "Gentlemen, the situation is dire," Ward began without preamble. "Our intelligence suggests we're facing a coordinated offensive led by a new hydrogen warlord, someone they're calling the Huntmaster." Voss leaned in, studying the tactical display. "These attack patterns, they're unlike anything we've seen before. Multiple simultaneous thrusts, each one designed to pull our forces in different directions." Rye nodded grimly. "Classic divide and conquer. They're using fast-moving hunter groups to lure our ships out of position, while their capital ships move in to lay siege to our colonies." Ward's tactical advisor, Lieutenant Park, stepped forward. "Sir, we've identified at least a dozen major incursions already underway. The Huntmaster is throwing everything he has at us, hoping to overwhelm our defenses through sheer numbers and ferocity." The Admiral's mind raced, weighing options and calculating risks. He knew that splitting his forces was dangerous, but the alternative was unthinkable. "We have no choice," he declared. "We must divide the fleet to meet these threats head-on." He turned to Voss. "Commander, I want you to take a strike force back to the mining colony. Link up with Captain Rye's ships and hit those hydrogen hunters hard. Don't let them regroup." "Understood, sir," Voss replied crisply. Ward faced the rest of his officers. "I'll lead our main battle group in a series of strikes against their siege forces. We'll punch through their lines and relieve our besieged colonies one by one." He paused, his voice lowering. "Make no mistake, this is total war. The Hirogen have made their intentions clear. They mean to wipe us out completely. We cannot allow that to happen." The bridge fell silent as the weight of his words sank in. Ward continued, his tone hardening. "I'm authorizing unrestricted engagement protocols. Any Hirogen forces caught slaughtering civilians are to be shown no quarter. Is that understood?" A chorus of affirmatives echoed across the bridge. Ward nodded, knowing he was treading a razor's edge between necessary action and unbridled vengeance. But with humanity's very existence at stake, there was no room for half measures. The bridge erupted into frenzied activity as officers rushed to carry out their assignments. Ward watched as his mighty armada split into multiple battle groups, each one surging off toward its designated target at maximum warp. Voss's face appeared on the main view screen, illuminated by intermittent flashes of weapons fire. "Admiral, we've made contact with the hydrogen hunter cadres at the mining colony. They're putting up one hell of a fight, but we're holding our own." Ward spun to face the view screen just as a massive Hirogen Dreadnought materialized out of nowhere, its jagged hull dripping with weapon emplacements. A salvo of disruptor fire lashed out, slamming into the shields of Ward's flagship with bone-jarring force. "All ships, return fire," Ward bellowed. "Concentrate your attacks on their lead vessel." Space lit up with crisscrossing beams of energy as Ward's dreadnoughts unleashed their devastating firepower. The Hirogen ships answered in kind, and soon the void was filled with the silent fury of titanic warships locked in mortal combat. "Push forward," Ward ordered. "We need to break through their lines and reach the colony." His dreadnoughts surged ahead, weathering a storm of enemy fire as they battered their way through the Hirogen blockade. Explosions blossomed in the darkness as ships on both sides succumbed to the relentless barrage. Ward's flagship shook violently as a Hirogen cruiser rammed it in a final act of defiance. Damage reports scrolled across his console, but he paid them no heed. They were almost through. "Sir, we've breached their defensive perimeter," announced the tactical officer. "The colony is in sight." Ward allowed himself a grim smile. They'd won the first round, but he knew the real battle was only beginning. The Huntmaster's forces were vast, and this was just one of many fronts. As his ships moved to secure the liberated colony, Ward steeled himself for the long and bloody campaign ahead. Admiral Ward stood at the helm of his flagship, his eyes fixed on the holographic display before him. The bridge hummed with tension as he input the final commands for his audacious gambit. "Transmit new orders to all battle groups," Ward commanded, his voice steady despite the weight of his decision. "Commander Voss, maintain a defensive perimeter around the mining colony. Use its mineral reserves as bait to fix the Huntmaster's forces in place." As the orders went out, Ward turned to his executive officer. "Initiate Protocol Omega. All Dreadnoughts are to begin a feigned withdrawal from the core worlds." Across the sector, human warships disengaged from their defensive positions. Engines flared as they executed a fighting retreat, their weapons still blazing defiantly at pursuing Hyrogen vessels. In the communications center, technicians worked feverishly to broadcast false distress signals. "Mayday, Mayday, this is New Eden Colony. We're under heavy attack. Our defenses are collapsing." Similar cries echoed from world after world, painting a picture of human resistance crumbling under the relentless Hyrogen assault. As Ward's fleet regrouped in a remote star system along the rimward fringe, he watched the tactical display with laser focus. Red icons representing Hyrogen forces surged toward the seemingly vulnerable core worlds. "They've taken the bait," Ward murmured. But even as the human dreadnoughts withdrew, a different kind of operation was unfolding. Swarms of autonomous drones, their hulls gleaming dully in the starlight, descended upon the abandoned colonies. Their manipulator arms worked tirelessly, stripping every last gram of precious minerals from stockpiles and processing facilities. These harvester fleets trailed in the wake of the retreating warships, their cargo holds steadily filling with the very resources the Hyrogen so desperately sought. On a desolate asteroid, Captain Rye oversaw the placement of decoy ore containers. "Careful with those antimatter charges," he barked at his team. "One false move, and we'll blow ourselves to atoms instead of fooling the Hyrogen." Back at the rendezvous point, Ward's armada bustled with activity. Crews worked around the clock to refit and resupply the battered ships. As the harvester drones arrived, their payloads were transferred to heavily armored haulers under the watchful eyes of armed guards. In a cavernous hangar bay, engineers labored over a massive lattice of iridium, carefully integrating volatile antimatter into its structure. The air crackled with barely contained energy as they transformed the mineral stockpile into a weapon of unimaginable destructive potential. Ward stood before the completed antimatter lure, its surface shimmering with deadly promise. He turned to Captain Rye, who had just returned from his mission. "It's time," Ward said grimly. "Take your strike force and light the fuse." Rye nodded, his face set with grim purpose. Hours later, his ships unleashed a barrage of fire on one of the decoy asteroid colonies. The antimatter charges detonated in a blinding flash, sending a massive energy spike rippling across space. On the bridge of the Hyrogen flagship, the Huntmaster's eyes gleamed with predatory hunger as his sensors detected the telltale signature. "At last," he growled, "the humans' precious minerals are within our grasp. All ships, converge on that energy source. Leave nothing standing." Oblivious to the trap they were rushing headlong into, the Hyrogen armada surged toward Ward's position with single-minded purpose. As they crossed the invisible threshold around the antimatter matrix, Ward gave the fateful order. "Activate the lure." In an instant, the fabric of space itself seemed to tear apart. The antimatter detonation erupted with the force of 1 billion suns, engulfing the Hyrogen fleet in a maelstrom of pure annihilation. Warships vaporized in mid-flight, their hulls peeling away smoothly before disintegrating entirely. The inferno raged for what seemed an eternity, scouring the very stars from the sky. When it finally began to fade, only scattered debris and ionized gas remained where the mighty Hyrogen armada had once been. Ward's dreadnoughts moved in, mopping up the handful of enemy ships that had survived on the periphery of the blast. As the last Hyrogen vessel winked out of existence, A profound silence settled over the bridge. The echoes of the Huntmaster's defeat still reverberated across the stars, but Admiral Ward had no time to celebrate. His eyes scanned tactical readouts, tracking pockets of hydrogen resistance that clung stubbornly to life in the outer colonies. Ward's brow furrowed as he studied the data. Looks like we've got a new player, Identify. Intelligence tags him as Cradden, sir. He's amassed a sizable force, at least a dozen warships and twice as many hunter cadres. The Admiral's lips thinned, and he's wasting no time putting them to use. Show me. A holographic display flickered to life, revealing the Theta Sidus system. Red icons swarmed across the projection, each one representing a Hirogen raiding party. Ward watched as they struck settlement after settlement, leaving destruction in their wake. "Get me Captain Rye," Ward ordered. Moments later, Rye's face appeared on the main view screen. The captain's eyes were sunken with exhaustion, but they burned with drive. "Captain, I'm dispatching you to Theta Sidus," Ward said without preamble. "This warlord Cradden needs to be dealt with. Take your Dreadnought strike force and hit him hard. Priority 1 is neutralizing the threat, but I want you to get those civilians out if you can." Rye nodded sharply. "Understood, Admiral. We'll make it happen." Hours later, Rye's fleet dropped out of warp on the outskirts of Theta Sidus. The captain stood on his bridge, surveying the battlefield before him. A massive orbital outpost loomed in the distance, dripping with weapons. "Tactical analysis," Rye barked. His weapons officer responded instantly. "Heavy fortifications, sir. Interlocking defense grids, fighter squadrons on patrol. They were ready for us." Rye's eyes narrowed. "They may be ready, but so are we. All ships commence bombardment of the outpost's outer defenses. Launch fighters and prep boarding craft. We're punching through to those civilian hubs." The void lit up as Rye's dreadnoughts opened fire, their energy weapons lancing out to slam against the outpost's shields. Hydrogen warships surged forward to meet them, disruptor beams slicing through space. Fighter wings screamed past the bridge, human and hydrogen craft tangling in furious dogfights. Rye's grip tightened on his command chair as the ship rocked under enemy fire. "Push forward," he shouted. "We need to reach those transit hubs." The battle raged for hours, a titanic slugging match between two implacable foes. Slowly, inexorably, Rye's forces ground down the hydrogen defenses. One by one, Cradden's orbital bastions fell silent. Just as victory seemed within reach, alarms blared across Rye's bridge. "Sir," his sensor officer cried, "massive decompression detected at Transit Hub Alpha. Life signs, thousands of them. They're venting into space." Rye's blood ran cold as he realized the horrific implications. "Cradon," he snarled, "he's sacrificing the refugees to slow us down." For a moment, Rye's fists clenched in helpless rage. Then his training took over. As his fleet scrambled to respond, Rye watched Cradden's remaining forces regroup, taking advantage of the lull to fortify new defensive positions. The Hirogen warlord had bought himself time, but at a terrible cost. Rye's mind raced, calculating odds and weighing options. They couldn't afford another drawn-out engagement. He needed to end this quickly. "Get me our top engineers," he snapped. "I've got an idea, but it's going to take some creative thinking." Admiral Ward stood motionless on the bridge of his flagship, his eyes fixed on the tactical display. The enormity of the threat now facing humanity threatened to overwhelm him. He watched as countless red dots representing Shrakath's armada flooded into the outer reaches of human space. "Dear God," whispered Commander Voss, her voice barely audible. "There's no end to them." Ward's teeth clenched. He'd known this day might come, but the reality of it still hit like a physical blow. "Assemble the War Council," he ordered, his voice steady despite the turmoil within. "Now." Minutes later, Ward faced his top officers and strategists across the holotable. The grim faces staring back at him told him they all understood the gravity of the situation. "Ladies and gentlemen," Ward began, "I won't sugarcoat this. We're facing extinction." He gestured to the tactical display. "Our long-range probes have detected Shrakath's armada. It's massive. Tens of thousands of capital ships, including dreadnoughts that outclass our own. A ripple of dismay ran through the assembled officers. Ward continued, "Even if we concentrate every ship we have, we can't hope to stop this force through conventional means." A hush fell over the room. Ward's eyes bored into Voss. "You're certain?" Voss nodded, her expression haunted. "I've run the numbers a dozen times. It's our only shot at denying Shrakath total victory." Ward turned away, staring out the viewport at the stars beyond. The weight of what he was about to do pressed down on him like a physical force. He thought of all the colonies that would be stripped bare, the resources that would be consumed in this high-stakes endeavor. Finally, he turned back to face his officers. "Initialize Tidesfire," he said, his voice leaden, and activate Code Midnight. The next hours passed in a blur of activity. Ward watched grimly as the automated systems sprang to life across human space. Mining drones descended on colony worlds like swarms of locusts, stripping every scrap of fissile material. On countless asteroids and moons, ancient forges stirred to life. Robotic arms began the painstaking process of assembling new dreadnoughts from raw materials. It was a race against time, and Ward knew the fate of humanity hung in the balance. Days stretched into weeks. Ward dispatched his remaining fleets on hit-and-run missions, buying precious time. He received constant updates on the Tidesfire weapons' progress and the slow birth of the new dreadnought armada. Captain Rye's voice crackled over the comm. "Admiral, we've got the first batch of recruits through basic training. They're green, but they'll have to do." Ward nodded, though Rye couldn't see him. "Good work, Captain. Get them assigned to the new ships as they come online. We'll need every hand we can get." As Shrakath's forces pressed deeper into human territory, Ward watched colony after colony fall silent. But where the Hirogen expected to find spoils of war, they found only barren worlds stripped of resources. From every vector, newly forged human dreadnoughts surged into view. Thousands upon thousands of warships, crewed by hastily trained volunteers and grizzled veterans alike. On the bridge of his flagship, Ward allowed himself a grim smile. "All ships, this is Admiral Ward. Engage the enemy. For Earth, for humanity, attack." Space lit up with the fury of countless energy weapons as the two titanic fleets clashed. Dreadnoughts exchanged titanic broadsides while smaller craft danced between them. The battle that would decide the fate of humanity had begun. The void around Earth erupted in a cataclysm of light and fury. Thousands of human and Hirogen dreadnoughts clashed amid a maelstrom of debris, their massive forms dwarfed by the planet they fought to claim or defend. On the bridge of his flagship, Admiral Ward stood motionless, his eyes fixed on the tactical display. The sheer scale of the conflict unfolding before him was almost beyond comprehension. Ward nodded, allowing himself a moment of pride. These hastily trained crews were all that stood between humanity and extinction. "Sir," Park's voice cut through his thoughts, "deep-range augers detecting massive energy signatures entering the system. It's another Hirogen armada." Ward's eyes hardened. He'd prepared for this, but the reality of it still hit him like a physical blow. "Initiate Tidesfire protocol," he ordered, his voice steady despite the turmoil within. Across the Sol system, hardened silos disgorged their payloads. Streams of antimatter ordnance converged on a single point, coalescing into a monstrous charge that dwarfed even the titanic warships around it. "All ships not part of the stabilizer formation, prepare for emergency FTL jump," Ward commanded. "Stabilizer units, move into position and engage containment fields." As thousands of human vessels streaked away to safety, those remaining formed a protective sphere around the growing antimatter matrix, their shields strained against the awesome energies building within. Shrakath, realizing the threat too late, hurled his forces at the human cordons in desperation. Dreadnoughts vanished in searing flashes as antimatter met matter. Fighters and corvettes were swept aside like leaves in a hurricane. Ward watched the timer tick down, his heart pounding. "Stabilizer units, final compression sequence. All remaining ships, brace for impact." The universe seemed to hold its breath for a heartbeat. Then, with a flash that outshone the sun itself, The antimatter matrix detonated. The initial shockwave vaporized everything in its path, ships, stations, and even the very fabric of space-time itself. As the cataclysm expanded outward, it scoured the surfaces of Earth, Mars, and every other world in the inner system. When the fires finally faded, Ward surveyed the aftermath through eyes stinging with unshed tears. Where Earth had once hung in majestic beauty, there was now only a scarred, sterile ball of rock. The cradle of humanity was no more. His comms crackled to life. It was Captain Ray, his voice thick with emotion. "Admirals, it's done. The Hirogen fleet is destroyed. But the cost..." As his battered ships limped away from the graveyard of their homeworld, a final transmission cut through the silence. It was Shrakath, somehow still alive on the edges of the blast. "You've doomed yourselves to wander as outcasts," the Hirogen overlord snarled. "We will hunt you to the ends of the universe." As Shrakath's vessel disappeared in a final burst of weapons fire, Ward turned to face his crew. Their faces were etched with grief, but also with an iron willpower. "We've lost our home," Ward said, his voice carrying across the silent bridge. "But we haven't lost who we are. Humanity endures, and we will forge a new path among the stars." The gleaming spires of New Alexandria rose against the alien sky of Kepler 76b, a testament to humanity's resilience. Admiral Ward stood at the viewport of his office, watching shuttles buzz between the towering arcologies, his wrinkled hands clasped behind his back, the weight of decades bearing down on his shoulders. A chime at the door broke his reverie. "Enter," he called out. Commander Voss strode in, her silver hair tied back in a severe bun. She carried herself with the same military precision as always, despite her civilian attire. "Admiral," she said, nodding curtly, "the Council is ready for your proposal." Ward turned, his eyes narrowing. "And I suppose you're here to argue against it one last time." Voss sighed, her shoulders sagging slightly. "Sir, with respect, diverting resources to rebuild our war machine is a mistake. We have a chance to forge a new path here, one free from the cycle of violence that nearly destroyed us. And leave ourselves defenseless against the next threat," Ward countered, his voice rising. "The galaxy hasn't suddenly become safer, Sarah. We need to be prepared." "Prepared for what?" Voss shot back. "To torch another world, to sacrifice billions more lives?" Ward smacked his head on the desk, decades of pent-up frustration boiling over. "Damn it, Commander, I made the call that saved our species. Don't you dare imply I did it lightly." A tense silence fell between them. Outside, the bustle of the colony continued, oblivious to the ideological chasm widening within its leadership. Finally, Voss spoke, her voice softer. "I know you did what you thought was necessary, sir, but the world has changed. Our children don't carry the scars we do. They want to build, not destroy." Ward's shoulders slumped. He suddenly felt every one of his years. "And what happens when the next Shrakath comes knocking at our door? What then, Sarah?" "Then we face it together," Voss replied, "as a united people, not divided by fear and mistrust." Before Ward could respond, his comm unit chirped. "Admiral," Captain Ray's voice crackled through, "the Council is assembled and waiting." Ward nodded, though Ray couldn't see him. "On my way." He turned back to Voss. "I suppose we'll let them decide our course, then." As they walked towards the Council chambers, Ward couldn't shake the feeling that this debate was nowhere near the end. The corridors bustled with activity, filled with people too young to remember Earth, let alone the horrors of the Hirogen War. He caught snippets of excited conversation about new terraform projects, scientific breakthroughs, and cultural festivals. It was a far cry from the unwavering purpose that had dominated shipboard life during their exodus. Ward's gaze lingered on a group of laughing teenagers. They'd never known the gut-wrenching fear of facing extinction, never had to make the choices that would haunt him to his grave. As they approached the council doors, Voss placed a hand on his arm. "Whatever happens in there, sir, remember, we're all still on the same side." Ward nodded, squaring his shoulders. He took a deep breath and pushed open the doors, ready to face whatever future awaited humanity on the other side. As Ward pushed open the council chamber doors, he couldn't have imagined the chain of events his actions would set in motion. Decades passed, and the seeds of discord he'd planted that day grew into a chasm that threatened to tear humanity apart once more. The reactivation of Code Midnight sent shockwaves through the colonies. Massive robotic shipyards, long dormant, whirred to life. On a dozen worlds, the ground split open as hidden facilities emerged. Titanium alloy and carbon nanotubes fused under the heat of plasma torches, skeletal warship frames taking shape with eerie efficiency. Captain Rye stood on the bridge of Ward's flagship, fists clenched at his sides. "You can't do this, Admiral. The Council never authorized—" "I don't need their authorization," Ward cut him off, eyes fixed on a holographic display of the growing fleet. "The threat is real, Rye. We must be ready." "Ready for what?" Rye's voice rose. "To become the very thing we fled, a warmongering species that destroys everything in its path." The streets of New Alexandria churned with angry voices. Protesters crowded the broad avenues, waving signs denouncing Ward's actions. "No more warships," they chanted. "Peace, not war." Commander Voss pushed through the throng, her security detail struggling to keep pace. She tapped her earpiece. "Status update on the Central Plaza?" "Situation deteriorating, ma'am," came the response. "Crowds turned ugly. They're trying to breach the perimeter around the council building." A deafening explosion rocked the city. Voss stumbled, steadying herself against a wall. Smoke billowed from the direction of the spaceport. "What the hell was that?" she demanded. "Her assassination attempt on Admiral Ward," her aide reported, voice tight. "He's secure, but, ma'am, he's declaring martial law." Voss closed her eyes, a wave of dread washing over her. This was about to get much, much worse. Under cover of darkness, Rye's commandos slipped aboard the automated freighters. They moved with practiced efficiency, disabling tracking systems and reprogramming navigation computers. As the ships approached the orbital shipyards, Rye's voice crackled over the secure channel. "Remember, people, non-lethal takedowns only. These are our own people we're fighting." The next hours passed in a blur of action. Stun grenades detonated in control rooms. Security teams fell to precision taser strikes. Rye himself led the charge onto the primary construction platform, fingers flying across consoles as he initiated emergency launch protocols. Alarms blared throughout the station. "Unauthorized launches detected," a panicked voice shouted over the general frequency. "All units converge on—" The transmission cut off as Rye's team severed the main communications array. One by one, half-finished dreadnoughts broke free of their berths, thrusters flaring to life. "All ships form up on me," Rye ordered, settling into the captain's chair of the lead vessel. "Plot jump coordinates to fallback point Alpha. We're getting out of here." The stolen fleet vanished in a series of brilliant flashes, leaving chaos in their wake. Ward stood rigid on the bridge of his command ship, watching the sensor readouts in disbelief. "How many?" he asked, voice dangerously quiet. 37 ships, sir," his XO reported, "mostly unfinished, but—" And so began a new chapter in humanity's troubled history. A civil war unlike any they'd faced before. Brother against brother, ideology against ideology, their weapons turned inward rather than outward. Rye's stolen ships struck without warning. Supply convoys exploded in silent balls of fire. Isolated outposts went dark. Ward's forces retaliated with brutal efficiency, glassing suspected rebel worlds from orbit. Humanity bled. The twin worlds of Kepler-76 became divided camps, each accusing the other of betraying their species' future. Months stretched into years. The conflict showed no signs of abating. Then a breakthrough. "We've found them, sir," Ward's intelligence chief reported, indicating a swirling nebula on the star chart. "Rye's primary repair and refit station. If we hit it now—" Ward nodded, a predatory gleam in his eye. "Prepare the fleet, this ends now." As Ward's dreadnoughts gathered for the final assault, alarms blazed through Rye's hidden base. The game of cat and mouse was over. Now it was time for the— The nebula's swirling gases parted as Ward's armada burst through, a spearhead of gleaming metal and pulsing energy fields. On the bridge of his flagship, the Retribution, Ward leaned forward, eyes locked on the tactical display. "Contact!" his sensor officer barked. Multiple signatures emerging from Sector Gamma 9. Ward's lips curled into a predatory smile. "Excellent. All ships execute attack pattern Omega. Let's box them in." The massive dreadnoughts banked in perfect synchronization, their engines flaring brilliant blue against the nebula's muted backdrop. Weapon batteries swiveled, locking onto the faint energy signatures of Rye's hidden base. Inside the makeshift repair dock, alarms blared. Rye sprinted down a corridor, the deck plates shuddering beneath his feet. "Status report!" he shouted into his comm unit. "Ward's found us, sir." His Exo's voice crackled with static. "We're initiating emergency launch protocols, but—" The rest of the transmission was drowned out by a deafening roar as the first salvo from Ward's fleet tore through the nebula. Rye stumbled, catching himself against a bulkhead. He could feel the station buckling around him. "All hands, abandon ship," Rye ordered, his voice carrying through the base-wide comms. "Get to the evacuation shuttles and rendezvous at the flagship." As his crew scrambled to obey, Rye sprinted for the docking bay where his prized vessel waited. The ancient Dreadnought, a relic of humanity's bygone wars, loomed before him. Its battle-scarred hull bore testament to 100 conflicts, and now it would face its greatest test. Rye vaulted into the command chair, his fingers flying across holographic interfaces. "Engineering, I need full power to shields and engines. Weapons, charge the Nova cannon." "Sir," his weapons officer protested, "the Nova cannon hasn't been properly calibrated since—" "Just do it," Rye snapped. He felt the deck plates vibrate as the massive weapon began to power up. Outside, Ward's fleet tightened its noose. Lances of superheated plasma sliced through Rye's support ships, turning them into expanding clouds of debris. The few operational warships Rye had managed to scramble put up a valiant defense, but they were hopelessly outgunned. Rye's flagship shuddered as it broke free of its docking clamps. "Helm, get us clear of the nebula," he ordered. "We need a clean shot." The massive vessel lumbered forward, its ancient engines straining against the electromagnetic eddies of the nebula. Ward's ships, sleek and deadly, moved to intercept. "Nova cannon at 60% charge," the weapons officer reported. "Sir, if we fire before reaching full power, the feedback could tear us apart." Rye's nucleus tightened as he gripped the arms of his chair. "We don't have a choice. Ward's not going to give us the time we need." The space around them lit up with weapons fire. Rye's ship rocked violently as multiple impacts hammered its shields. Warning klaxons blared across the bridge. Rye's eyes narrowed as he watched Ward's fleet close in for the kill. "Helm, full stop. Engineering, divert all power to the Nova cannon. We make our stand here." The Dreadnought's massive frame groaned in protest as it came to a halt. Energy crackled along its hull, arcing between weapon emplacements as every scrap of power was funneled into the ancient superweapon. "Nova cannon at 85%, the weapons officer reported, his voice tense. 95. Rye's finger hovered over the firing control. "Come on," he muttered. "Come on." Ward's ships loomed large in the view screen, their weapon batteries glowing with building energy. In moments they would unleash a barrage that would obliterate Rye's vessel. The Nova cannon discharged with a silent flash that seemed to bend the very fabric of space. A wave of pure antimatter erupted from the Dreadnought's prow, catching the lead elements of Ward's fleet head-on. The effect was catastrophic. Ward's ships simply ceased to exist, vaporized in an instant by the unimaginable energies unleashed. Those further back were battered by the resulting shockwave, tumbling end over end as their systems overloaded. On the bridge of the Retribution, Ward was thrown from his command chair. He pulled himself up, staring in disbelief at the carnage unfolding before him. A full third of his fleet had been annihilated in a single shot. But it was too late. As Ward's surviving vessels struggled to reorient themselves, Rye's battered flagship was already accelerating away. Its hull glowed cherry red from the strain, but it ploughed through the debris field of destroyed ships with single-minded purpose. Ward watched helplessly as Rye's vessel winked out of existence, jumping to FTL. He pounded his fist against a console, fury etched across his face. Ward's eyes hardened as he surveyed the devastation around him. "Set course for New Alexandria," he growled, "and get me every scrap of intelligence we have on possible bolt holes for that traitor. This isn't over, not by a long shot." As the remnants of Ward's once mighty armada limped away from the shattered nebula, the embers of civil war continued to burn. Humanity's future hung in the balance, with two implacable foes now locked in a deadly game of cat and mouse across the stars. The uncharted star system crackled with radioactive energy, its outer reaches littered with twisted metal and shattered hulls. Ward's battered armada pushed through the debris field, sensors straining to pick up any trace of their quarry. On the bridge of the Retribution, Ward leaned over a holographic display, his face etched with lines of exhaustion. "Status report," he barked. His tactical officer, Lieutenant Kira, tapped at her console. "Long-range scans are picking up massive energy signatures near the inner planets, sir. It looks like shipyard activity." The hologram flickered, resolving into a 3D map of the system's core. Ghostly outlines of massive structures orbited the innermost worlds, pulsing with artificial life. "Impossible," Ward breathed. "Those are hydrogen forges. We mothballed the last of them years ago." Kira zoomed in on one particular structure. "Sir, look at this, that energy signature. It's Rye's flagship, but it's different, bigger." Ward's fist clenched. "He's upgrading. We can't let him finish." He straightened, his voice ringing out across the bridge. "All ships, battle stations, prepare for immediate engagement." Klaxons blared throughout the fleet as gunners rushed to their posts and reactor crews initiated combat protocols. Ward watched grimly as his dreadnoughts formed up into attack formation. "Sir," Kira called out, her voice tight, "we're in range, awaiting your order." Ward didn't hesitate. The void lit up as antimatter warheads streaked towards the distant shipyards. For a moment all was silent. Then a series of blinding flashes erupted across the star system's heart. "Direct hits," Kira reported. "The shipyard's outer structures are collapsing. Rye's flagship is still intact, but its systems are fluctuating." Ward allowed himself a grim smile. "Press the attack. I want that ship reduced to—" His words died in his throat as the seemingly inert asteroids surrounding the shipyard suddenly came to life. Massive gun barrels emerged from hidden recesses, swiveling to target Ward's fleet. The first salvo of colossal tungsten rods slammed into the Retribution with apocalyptic force. Ward was thrown from his feet as the deck bucked beneath him. Sparks showered from ruptured conduits as the ship's hull screamed in protest. "Damage report," Ward bellowed, pulling himself back to his command chair. "Hull breach on decks 4 through 7, an officer shouted over the cacophony of alarms. "Reactor containment is failing." His words were cut off as another impact rocked the Retribution. Through the flickering view screen, Ward watched in horror as more of the titanic projectiles tore through his fleet. Ward's eyes widened as he saw the monstrous silhouette of Rye's augmented dreadnought bearing down on them, its hull glowing with barely contained energy. But it was futile. Rye's ship slammed into the Retribution with world-shattering force. Ward was thrown violently against his restraints as the two Leviathans became one twisted mass of screaming metal. In those final moments, as reality itself seemed to tear apart around him, Ward caught a glimpse of Rye's bridge through a ruptured bulkhead. Their eyes met across the gulf of vacuum and ideology that had driven them to this point. Then in a final terrible flash, both ships vanished in a maelstrom of antimatter annihilation. Silence fell across the star system. The surviving ships of both fleets drifted aimlessly, their crews stunned by the sudden loss of both leaders. As the pall of battle slowly lifted, a lone vessel limped away from the carnage, Rye's flagship, mortally wounded but still intact. Its hull flickered with arcs of escaping plasma as it struggled against the pull of nearby gravity wells. With a final, desperate surge of its overtaxed engines, the ship vanished into the depths of space, leaving behind only questions and the ashes of a war that had consumed humanity's best and brightest. The remnants of humanity's fleet drifted aimlessly through the void, a shattered armada without purpose or direction. On the bridge of the battered dreadnought Invictus, Commander Alexander Kuznetsov stared at the flickering holo display, his weathered face illuminated by the ghostly blue light. "Sir, we've lost contact with the last of Ward's loyalist ships," reported his XO, Lieutenant Sonya Volkov. "It seems they've jumped to parts unknown." Kuznetsov nodded grimly. "And Rise followers?" The commander's calloused fingers traced the outline of an unmapped region on the star chart. "Then it's time we forge our own path, set course for Regio Extrema." Days turned to weeks as the Invictus and its small flotilla of support ships pushed deeper into uncharted space. The crew worked tirelessly, repairing battle damage and reconfiguring systems for long-range exploration. Finally, sensors pinged. "Contact!" called out the tactical officer. "Massive structure dead ahead." The view screen flickered to life, revealing a colossal space station suspended against a backdrop of swirling nebulae. Its hull was scarred and pitted, entire sections torn away by some ancient cataclysm. "Heterogen architecture," Kuznetsov muttered. "Prep boarding teams, full environmental precautions." Hours later, Kuznetsov led the first wave through the station's decompressed corridors. Emergency lights cast eerie shadows as they moved deeper into the structure's bowels. "Sir," a young ensign's voice crackled over the comm, "you need to see this." Kuznetsov rounded a corner and froze. Row upon row of stasis pods lined the chamber walls, each containing a humanoid figure. Some appeared almost human, others wildly alien. "There must be thousands," Volkov whispered, her voice filled with awe and horror. Kuznetsov approached a nearby console, brushing away centuries of dust. With a few deft commands, he coaxed the ancient system to life. Data streams scrolled across the screen, revealing the station's dark purpose. The implications hit like a hammer blow. Here, in this forgotten outpost, lay the key to humanity's survival and its evolution. Kuznetsov's mind raced with possibilities. "Download everything," he ordered, "and get me a secure channel to the fleet. We're going to need every available ship if we're to locate more of these facilities." As his crew scrambled to comply, Kuznetsov gazed at the sea of sleeping faces. The path ahead was fraught with ethical quandaries and unfathomable risks, but the alternative, the slow extinction of the human race, was unthinkable. "May our descendants forgive us," he murmured, "for the choices we must make." The bridge of the Xenoclast flagship trembled as Kuznetsov gripped the command console, his fingers tightening from the strain. Sparks erupted from ruptured conduits, casting eerie shadows across the faces of his surviving crew. "Damage report," Kuznetsov barked, his augmented eyes scanning the flickering holograms before him. Lieutenant Vasquez, her uniform torn and stained with hydraulic fluid, responded through gritted teeth. "Hull integrity at 32%, sir. Life support systems are failing on decks 7 through 12. We've lost all contact with the Valiant and the Thunderchild." Kuznetsov nodded grimly. He tapped a series of commands into his neural interface, bringing up a three-dimensional map of their current position relative to known space. The image wavered and distorted, a visual representation of the cosmic horror they had just witnessed. "Navigation," he called out. "Plot the fastest course to Black Dock Sigma 9. We need to get there before—" His words trailed off as he noticed the strange oily sheen coating his hands. He watched in morbid fascination as his skin seemed to ripple and flow like quicksilver given life. "Sir," Vasquez's voice cut through his shock, "the crew, they're changing." All around the bridge, officers and technicians stared in horror at their own bodies. Some were stretching and twisting in ways that defied human anatomy, while others seemed to be phasing in and out of existence. Kuznetsov fought down the rising panic in his throat. "This is a result of our exposure to those entities. We need to reach quarantine immediately. He turned to his chief science officer, Dr. Reeves, whose form now seemed to occupy multiple points in space simultaneously. Doctor, I need you to gather all available data on what we encountered, every sensor reading, every scrap of telemetry. We're going to need it all if we're to have any hope of understanding what we're dealing with. Reeves nodded, his movements leaving ghostly after-images in the air. Already on it, sir. But I must warn you, much of our data storage was corrupted during the encounter. What we do have, it's unlike anything in our databases. The ship shuddered again, and Kuznetsov felt a sickening lurch in his stomach that had nothing to do with the inertial dampeners. He realized with growing dread that the very fabric of reality around them was becoming unstable. "Helm maximum speed," he ordered. "We need to outrun these spatial distortions before they tear us apart." As the battered remnants of the once proud Xenoclast flotilla limped towards the nearest safe harbor, Kuznetsov couldn't shake the feeling that they had stumbled upon something far beyond their comprehension. The Imra of these cosmic horrors burned in his mind, a stark reminder of humanity's insignificance in the face of such incomprehensible power. He keyed in the final authorization codes for the quarantine protocols, knowing that the moment they reached Black Dock Sigma 9, their ships would be sealed off from the rest of human civilization. It was a necessary precaution, but one that filled him with a sense of isolation he had never known before. As the stars streaked by outside the viewports, Kuznetsov began to dictate his preliminary report. "To all command-level personnel, we have encountered an entity of unimaginable power and malevolence. Our current theories of physics and warfare are woefully inadequate to deal with this threat. We must adapt, evolve, or face extinction." The Xenoclast fleet limped through the void, hull plates buckled and sparking. On the bridge of the flagship, Grand Admiral Valen Kuznetsov gripped his command chair. His skin rippled and flowed like mercury. "Set course for Zemo's Vale," he ordered, voice strained. "Maximum speed." Lieutenant Vasquez tapped furiously at her console. "Aye, sir. ETA 6 hours at current velocity." Kuznetsov nodded, fighting waves of nausea as his body rebelled against him. All around the bridge, crew members contorted in unnatural ways, some phasing in and out of visibility. The journey passed in tense silence, broken only by the groaning of overstressed bulkheads. As they approached Zemo's Vale, a heavily fortified station loomed before them. "This is quarantine control," a stern voice crackled over the comms. "Maintain current vector. Prepare for guided docking procedures." Sleek robotic arms extended from the station, grasping the battered ships and guiding them into cavernous docking bays. Kuznetsov watched through viewports as decontamination fields shimmered to life, bathing the fleet in eerie blue light. Hazmat-suited figures swarmed the ships, ushering dazed crew members into sterile isolation chambers. Kuznetsov found himself in a stark white room surrounded by blinking medical equipment. A doctor approached, face obscured behind a polarized faceplate. "Admiral, we need to run a full spectrum of scans immediately. Please remain still." Kuznetsov complied as best he could, fighting the urge to scream as his flesh crawled beneath his skin. Holographic readouts flared to life around him, displaying a dizzying array of biological data. The doctor's voice was tense. "This is unprecedented. Your cellular structure is reorganizing itself at the quantum level, and your neural pathways—" Kuznetsov cut him off. "I need a direct link to the fleet's central archives, now." "Sir, that's against all quarantine proto—" "Override code Omega-7 Delta," Kuznetsov growled. "Do it!" Reluctantly, the medical team complied. A neural interface descended from the ceiling, connecting with the base of Kuznetsov's skull. Instantly, his mind was flooded with raw data from the encounter. As his consciousness expanded, Kuznetsov felt his physical form begin to lose cohesion. The room filled with arcing energy as his body dissolved into a shimmering vortex of subatomic particles. "My God," someone whispered, "he's become pure energy." Kuznetsov's disembodied mind raced through the data streams, extrapolating terrifying futures, entire universes devoured by cosmic horrors, reality itself unraveling. With the last vestiges of his humanity, he issued a final command to the fleet. Activate the Prometheus Protocol. All ships deploy hyperdimensional armaments. This is our last stand. Throughout the quarantine zone, weapon systems beyond human comprehension surged to life. Reality buckled as the first salvo tore through the fabric of spacetime, seeding the cosmos with humanity's desperate countermeasure. Kuznetsov's essence expanded outward, becoming one with the defense grid. As his consciousness touched the outer edges of known space, he steeled himself for the coming storm. The real war was just beginning. The remnants of the Xenoclast fleet materialized in the stark void of Enzymo's Veil, a scattered assemblage of battered hulls and flickering energy signatures. Within the digital mindscape that now encompassed the fleet systems, Kuznetsov's consciousness surged into action. Across the fortified shipyards, klaxons blared as non-essential systems powered down. Automated fabricators whirred to life, churning out gleaming panels of metaspatial armor. Technicians swarmed over exposed hull sections, grafting hyperdimensional weapon mounts onto twisted metal. "Divert all power to the refit operations," Kuznetsov's disembodied voice echoed through comm channels. "We need these ships combat-ready yesterday." In the depths of a command center, Lieutenant Vasquez hunched over a holodisplay, her fingers dancing across tactile interfaces. "Admiral, I've established a secure quantum link, ready to broadcast on your command." A surge of data flowed through the network as Kuznetsov initiated the transmission. "To all surviving human outposts and vessels, this is Grand Admiral Kuznetsov of the Xenoclast fleet. We face an existential threat beyond our comprehension. Rendezvous at these coordinates for immediate strategic redeployment." Days crawled by, each moment pregnant with dread. Then a ping. A comm officer's eyes widened. "Sir, we're receiving responses." Data streams flooded in, each more dire than the last. Colony Epsilon 9 reported gravitational anomalies tearing apart their orbital platforms. The Vanguard flotilla transmitted frantic pleas as otherworldly entities phased through their hulls. Kuznetsov's digital consciousness sifted through the information, correlating data points and running countless simulations. A solution crystallized: the abandoned migrator shipforge. A cosmic ballet unfolded as battered human vessels limped through shimmering warp gates. Kuznetsov's Dreadnoughts, now overflowing with experimental weaponry, took up defensive formations around the stragglers. As the last ship cleared the final gate, long-range sensors screamed warnings. The fabric of reality itself bulged and stretched, giving way to impossible geometries that hurt the mind to perceive. "Energy spike," a sensor tech shouted. "It's coming from the chasm." Kuznetsov's consciousness expanded, interfacing directly with the shipforge's ancient systems. Metaspatial emplacements hummed to life, spewing forth quantum-entangled force fields. The wavefront hit. Reality buckled. Across the fleet, hulls twisted like taffy, internal volumes expanding and contracting in ways that defied Euclidean geometry. Crew members screamed as their bodies warped and flickered. Within the digital realm, Kuznetsov's essence fragmented. Shards of his consciousness scattered across 1,000,000 parallel processes. He pushed through the cosmic static, forcing his will upon the universe itself. "Initiating contingency Omega," his fractured voice rang out. "All units brace for interspatial hyperburst." The shipforge's reactors screamed, pumping out impossible energies. In a single reality-shattering instant, the local curvature of spacetime inverted. The destructive wavefront folded in on itself, compressed into infinitesimal dimensions. Kuznetsov seized the moment. Emergency slipstream translocation now. Human vessels phased out of normal space, their very atoms scattering across dimensional boundaries. They rematerialized in a realm of twisted physics and inverted causality. As the last ship crossed over, the aperture snapped shut with terrifying finality. The pursuing horrors were locked out, but humanity found itself adrift in an alien cosmos that defied comprehension. The human vessels shuddered as they materialized in the alien realm. On the bridge of the flagship, Admiral Ward staggered, his equilibrium thrown off by the sudden shift in reality. He gripped the command console, steadying himself as he took in the impossible vista before him. "Status report!" he barked, his eyes fixed on the interface. Lieutenant Cho's fingers danced across her console. "Sir, all ships accounted for, but these readings can't be right." Ward leaned in, examining the data scrolling across the screen. Stars burned with an impossible inverted light. Gravity wells pulled outward instead of inward. The very atoms that made up their ships seemed to vibrate at frequencies that shouldn't exist. "It's real, Lieutenant," Ward said, his voice tight. "We've crossed into a negative universe." He keyed the ship-wide comm. "All hands, this is Admiral Ward. Establish defensive formation Delta 9. Sensors to maximum sweep." The fleet moved with practiced precision, despite the disorienting effects of their new environment. As the ships locked into position, Ward turned to his science officer. "Dr. Reeves, what can you tell me about our surroundings?" Reeves's face was ashen as he pored over the sensor data. "Sir, the laws of physics as we understand them, they don't apply here. We're detecting antimatter signatures everywhere. Gravity is inverted. Even light behaves differently." Ward nodded grimly. "Can our systems compensate?" "To a degree, sir. But long-term exposure to this environment, I can't predict the effects on our ships or our bodies." Before Ward could respond, a ping from the long-range sensors caught his attention. "Sir," the sensor operator called out, "I'm picking up faint energy signatures. They could be from our universe." Ward's eyes narrowed. "Commander Voss," he said, turning to his XO, "take a scouting party to investigate, but proceed with extreme caution. We don't know what else might have followed us through." As Voss's ships detached from the main fleet, Ward watched them navigate the twisted space-time rifts that crisscrossed this bizarre realm. The vessels seemed to stretch and compress as they passed through areas of warped reality. Hours passed as Ward and his crew struggled to make sense of their alien surroundings. Then, Voss's voice crackled over the comm. "Admiral, we've located the source of the energy signatures. It's a debris field. Hydrogen ships, sir, hundreds of them, and we're detecting life signs." Ward's mind focused. "Survivors?" "Affirmative, sir. Scattered throughout the wreckage. Your orders?" Ward paused, weighing the risks against the potential intelligence they could gather. "Move in, Commander. Use tractor beams and boarding parties to extract any survivors, but be prepared for resistance." The rescue operation was chaotic and violent. Hydrogen warriors, driven mad by their ordeal, fought viciously against their human saviors. But in the end, Ward's forces prevailed, capturing several high-ranking Hydrogen commanders. Back on the flagship, Captain Rye stood before the holding cells, his face a mask of cold commitment. The captive Hydrogen snarled and spat, their alien features twisted with hatred. "You will tell us everything you know," Rye said, his voice low and dangerous. "About the entities that attacked us. About this realm. Everything." One of the Hydrogen, his armor cracked and scorched, leaned forward. "You know nothing of true horror, human. The Voria are beyond your comprehension." Rye's eyes narrowed. "Try me." As the interrogation progressed, the full terrifying scope of their situation became clear. The Voria, cosmic horrors of unimaginable power, had engineered this negative universe eons ago. They fed on the entropy of dying civilizations, orchestrating conflicts across realities to fuel their insatiable hunger. When Rye reported these findings to Ward, the Admiral's face grew ashen. "So this is it," he said quietly. "The end of everything we've ever known." But as hope began to fade, a glimmer of possibility emerged. The Hydrogen spoke of an ancient weapon, a stellar flux dynamo hidden on a barren world at the edge of this twisted realm, a weapon that could potentially trap even the Voria themselves. Ward's eyes blazed with newfound purpose. "Captain Rye," he said, his voice filled with fierce dedication, "assemble our best people. You're going after that dynamo." As Rye's task force prepared to depart, Ward addressed the fleet. "This is our last stand," he said, his voice carrying across every ship. "Everything we are, everything we've ever been, comes down to this moment. May whatever gods exist in this god-forsaken realm watch over us all." The human armada moved into position, forming a defensive perimeter around the mysterious antimatter world. As Rye's ships vanished into the twisted void, Ward stared out at the alien stars, knowing that the fate of humanity now hung by the thinnest of threads. Captain Rye's fleet pierced the roiling atmosphere of the antimatter world, their ships bucking and shuddering against the onslaught of ionic turbulence. Alarms blared across the command deck as Lieutenant Chen fought to maintain their trajectory. Rye gripped the arms of his command chair, his fingers tightening beneath his suit's exoskeleton. "Push through, Lieutenant. We don't have a choice." The viewscreen flickered and distorted, offering only glimpses of the hellish maelstrom outside. Arcs of antimatter energy lashed against their shields, each impact sending tremors through the ship's frame. "Energy signature detected," the sensor officer called out. "Faint but growing stronger." Rye leaned forward, his eyes fixed on the readout. "That's our target. All ships converge on those coordinates." The fleet punched through the final layer of ionized particles, emerging into a surreal landscape. Towering, crystalline mountains stretched as far as the eye could see, their facets refracting impossible colors. "My God," Chen whispered, her eyes wide. There, half buried in the crystalline range, loomed an alien megastructure of staggering proportions. Its surface writhed with strange geometries that hurt the mind to perceive. Rye stood, his voice steady as he issued orders. "Deploy the ground teams and excavation units. We breach that structure at all costs." Days blurred together as they burrowed through layers of exotic materials. Rye led from the front, his exosuit servos straining against gravitational anomalies that defied known physics. "Another force field," a technician called out, her scanners display a mess of quantum fluctuations. Rye nodded grimly. "Bring up the particle disruptors. We punch through no matter what." Finally, after what felt like an eternity of grinding progress, they breached the central chamber. Rye's breath caught in his throat as he beheld the impossible sight before him. Suspended in a shimmering anti-gravity field hung an object that defied description, the stellar flux dynamo. Its surface seemed to shift and writhe, as if struggling to exist in three-dimensional space. "Incredible," Dr. Yamamoto breathed, stepping forward with his scanning equipment. "The power readings are off the charts." As the science team moved to study the device, a low hum began to build. Rye felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. "Wait," he started to say, but it was too late. A series of resonance echoes rippled through the chamber. The dynamo pulsed, and the surrounding archways flared to life with eldritch energies. "We've triggered something," Yamamoto shouted, his eyes wide with panic. Before Rye could respond, a blinding shockwave erupted from the dynamo's core. He watched in horror as his team was vaporized, their bodies simply ceasing to exist. Only the protection of the containment archways saved Rye, and a handful of others from instant obliteration. Antimatter forces howled through the chamber, tearing apart reality itself. Rye's mind raced, knowing he had only seconds to act. With trembling hands, he activated his suit's neural uplink, preparing to interface directly with the awakening dynamo. "This is our last shot," he growled, steeling himself for what was to come. As his consciousness merged with the alien device, Rye's world exploded into a kaleidoscope of impossible data. Universes were born and died in the span of nanoseconds. He screamed, but no sound emerged, as his very essence was scattered across dimensions. Fighting against the overwhelming tide of information, Rye focused on a single goal: find the dynamo's core processes and shut them down. He pushed through layers of alien code, each more inscrutable than the last. Just as he felt his sanity slipping away, Rye found it, the subaxiomatic prime axiom. With the last of his strength, he initiated an emergency override. In that instant, reality itself tore apart. Rye watched helplessly as everything within 500 light-years simply ceased to exist, wiped from the cosmos by the dynamo's uncontrolled power. The Voria Armada, humanity's fleet, entire star systems, all vanished in a heartbeat. Rai's consciousness began to dissolve, merging with the void left behind. In the final moments before oblivion claimed him, Rai heard a whisper from beyond the boundaries of existence. Perhaps it is beyond the capacities of any single species to wield the megapotencies of an unmaker's bane, without first shattering the very chains binding them to obsolete existence. Then nothing. The universe fell silent, save for the faint hiss of hawking radiation drifting through the empty void. If you finished this story, please subscribe and like the video, then leave a comment that says, "I liked the story," and I will heart every single one of them. It really helps me. Thank you for your time.